Welcome to the World Builders Anvil, episode 281. Season 8 Game of Thrones story fixes are all wrong.
Except ours.
Or most of them. Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java and build. Welcome back. As always, trying for some clickbait. My name is Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And excited about the exiled king in the north, I am Michael Miller.
Yeah. Welcome back. This is actually an episode on season 8. A couple episodes ago for Michael's 279th, I guess actually it's 200th episode.
279, the episode number.
Yeah, was the episode. Might have felt a bit like a Game of Thrones, but that was actually only one thing that we wanted to chat about there.
Oh, yeah, we did talk about a lot of Game of Thrones that episode.
But, and warning, there will be spoilers if you've not seen it.
Spoilerific. We're going to talk about Game of Thrones again.
And specifically season 8, and specifically on the Webernets, as I now owe Michael a dime for saying.
Mm-hmm. One dime.
Cursed royalties. You know, there are a lot of people who are upset with season 8. And start off the top, I do think it's always valid to criticize anything that you watch. I might or might not agree with specific criticisms, but I've noticed a pattern where I think a lot of these story fixes I'm seeing are completely wrong. And I'm sure they're all not, because there's probably every possible fix that has been suggested that is out there. But for the most part, especially in the ones I've been coming across, I've seen a lot of reoccurring themes that people are trying to fix. And sometimes it's just someone in a Facebook rant, or you maybe on Twitter.
You've been reading my feeds, have you?
Individual complaints. And I actually will be the first to agree this was by far the weakest season, which is unfortunate.
And they had so much to work with too. That's what was so sad about it.
So much to work with. And so I'm actually going to say there are three specific reasons why most of them are wrong. And I'm going to start with what I have listed as the third one first.
Before we get into that, what is a story fix? What would you define as a story fix?
So that's people who are trying to fix the plot of season 8 to make it better.
And by that, do you mean people that want to fix it? Are they saying this is what they should have done, or this is what they can add to the end to make it better?
Most of the ones that I looked at were ones who were working with the pre-existing story, and maybe there's a little bit added in, but in general, they were trying to fix, within the time frame. Some people did add stuff into. This could be an exhaustive list. This could be a whole podcast in and of itself on fixing season 8. But we're not going to go into all of them. The ones I'm talking about really kind of lie within the context of what happened in season 8, mm-hmm. and things that people were upset by and wanted done differently. And now for the three reasons why people got it or are getting these fixes wrong. And I'm going to start with the most obvious one first. Execution and rushing the end of the series out caused most of the problems. It wasn't necessarily what happened. Now, I don't agree with all of the things.
You don't think that's true?
But I think most of it was through rushing the story out, so people didn't have things get pulled together correctly. And here's a bonus one that is not listed because we talked about a lot in your episode, which is the Jaime Lannister. A lot of people thought he was on a redemption arc. Mm-hmm. And that would be conventional wisdom, especially if you're a fan of fantasy. It's a very common thing. But this is going into the second reason why most of these are wrong. And, one of the things that J.R. Martin talked about a lot was his problems with Tolkien-like fantasy. And everything at the point where he came out with was very Tolkien. And so...
Tolkien or Tolkien?
Yes. And twice. And, and his thing was, the problem is they all get tied up way too neatly, and you're left with a story that feels hollow at the end because of that. And so his idea is you need to subvert what people expect in fantasy to make, truly the next gen fantasy. And so anytime you're trying to cleanly tie up, especially major plot points in his story, I think that's kind of against the intention.
Okay. I don't know if you're going to get to it with one of your other ones. So I got a bunch of things to say already, but the biggest point I have right there is I think the problem is not I agree with what he's saying in that let's create a new generation. That's fine. I'm fine with subversion. I'm fine with having things go in a direction you don't expect them to go. That's one of the things that a lot of people fell in love with Game of Thrones, and they may not have realized that that's why, is that you couldn't predict a lot of that, show, a lot of that, story. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh, this is about Ned Stark. This guy's awesome. He's honorable. He's, a badass. He's level-headed. He is, what you'd like to be if you were in a fantasy realm. You'd like to think that you'd be the level-headed, honorable, fighter guy, and that people are going to turn to him for advice and make him hand to the king. You're not king, but, you've got a whole lot of influence. And then he gets killed. Mm-hmm. And all of us were like, what? And we were like, but we fell in love with the show right there. Even if we hated them killing him,
yes, we
fell in love with the show because we're like, oh my God, what's going to happen next? Mm-hmm. If all bets are off, if they killed Ned Stark at the end of the first season. However,
you're about to get to the fair point. Yep,
this is the fair point. You can give me all kinds of curveballs. You can make me, expect one thing and go another way. That's fine, but a story still needs a conclusion. And when you're built so much on, albeit expectation, but it's expectation that the story created. I don't need any more twists at the end. You've been twisting me for 8 seasons. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to end it now, you got to end some of it neatly.
Yes.
My opinion is that they should have brought certain things in for a landing. They didn't need to throw curveballs. They could have ended everything completely predictably, and we would have been very satisfied.
More people would have loved it.
Yeah. And I'm not saying, that they definitely should have or should not have done all of it that way, but there are certain storylines that I think should have been ended neater.
Yes. Or ended at all. Some just disappeared.
Yeah.
And I would say some of that, and I'd say the other fair point on that, against what I'm saying is a lot of times the show writers, because they were rushing through certain stories or evolving it, they ended up coming up with what they wanted a character to do in the series. And so they kind of came up with it in that season, and then they kind of
forced the character into that thing.
They did not subvert. Because subverting is their storytelling, which is taking you that way, but in such a way where you want to deny it. Like Ned Stark was a great example because you saw it coming, but we're still shocked when it actually happened. You're like, they're going to come up with a way to get him out of here because he's a good classic hero character. And so you kept any red herring they dingled out that might save him, you want to latch onto as the viewer. And so it worked well because they took time to tell that story. And when they got to it, you weren't really surprised, but you had hooked in so hard on the idea that his little compromise was going to get him out of this, that you were still surprised.
Yeah.
And now the thing.
Okay, go ahead.
I just want to get this one out there.
Get it out.
We can go back to the other problems with many of the story fixes out there. And it's Game of Thrones was inspired by historical events, which are just by themselves, the world is messy. And so, when you heavily take from something, and we've talked about this on the show before, this is the War of the Roses. I mean, the names aren't that far off. I mean, okay, Stark isn't Tudor, but they are the White Roses. The Lancasters, is there any family name in Game of Thrones that the Lancasters or the Red Roses might attach to? Because the two major players throughout, with the wrinkle of Daenerys thrown in there as well. Which I don't know if she's maybe more the Vikings. I don't really know, but really, a lot of the buildup, a lot of the battles, which is I think why in 279, neither one of us had any issue with the utter destruction of King's Landing. Now, we might have flaws with the way it was executed once again, but the idea that they just go in and decide, you know what? We're going to just level the city because they didn't give up in time. I didn't like the way they executed it because they did try to make it look like she just went crazy. And I thought that cheapened, she really wasn't on a descent into craziness. She was a level of crazy from the beginning, and that carried through so many times that her making that action seemed extreme because it was the most extreme she had done to that date, but was not by any means outside of the scope of her character. She's a conqueror. She is, but see, we think it's crazy because we live in a time and place.
I think it's crazy because of all the innocents killed. That's what I have a problem with.
Yes, but you're thinking from the lens of someone today.
No, I'm thinking.
My first point. In the past, those types of things weren't looked at the same way. It's about the political point of doing.
Well, let's not confuse the past with tech level, because we like to think that Game of Thrones took place in the past because of the tech level. So I think it's an unfair.
I'm just saying, look at the people and the way they acted and treated each other. This was a much more primitive civilization than the one we live in today.
Fair enough. I wanted to go back before we got too far, where you were talking about Jaime not having a redemption arc, because I believe that he did. I know in the prior episode that I was, saying the opposite, and that's because of what we were doing in the prior episode.
But you were right then, and you're wrong now.
But I do believe that he was on a redemption arc. He went up north to fight with the North against the dead. In
part, and I guarantee you, part of it was to protect Cersei.
I don't doubt that. But then, he's like, I'll fight. I'd like to fight under you if you'll have me. And I
think where that comes from is he did flirt with it throughout the series. There was part of him that wanted to go that way, but he always chose his sister at every point. Now, they could have switched it there and gone either way. I wouldn't have cared either way. I do think it was fitting they died together, not necessarily the way they did die.
I guess my biggest problem is how abrupt he left, and how
it was rushed,
and how nasty he was to her. Now, part of me sees that as he was doing her a favor. He was saying to Bran, "No, I'm a horrible person, so it should be easy to get over me because I'm a horrible person. And let me remind you of the horrible things that I've done, so you don't have to pine over me. You can just be like, okay, he could not accept a change in his nature." Like, that's how I read it. But, I also think...
I agree with you. I think the problem was he went from almost taking that chance and going the good way, and they didn't show any development, any reason that character would have just shifted back.
Yeah.
And now him leaving the way he did, I could have accepted that if they had that additional scene, but to me, that's an execution issue that's rushing through the story and not getting to that point in a way that you can be satisfied with it. And, I think even that would have been a more easy thing, just to go in and add one more scene of him talking with his brother or something like that. And, getting pulled back, and you can see him getting pulled back to his sister before he exits, before that scene where he's really rough. But that's actually not one of the scenes we're planning to talk about, but we will be derailed because there are lots of very valid criticisms, especially in season 8. Things that could have been done better. And I'm not even saying all of them could be fixed because of an execution issue, but I think in general, many of the problems were caused by that. Now, the first real one I want to talk about that I see all over the place is a lot of people feel betrayed that Daenerys did not become queen. Daenerys should have not become queen. Nothing against Daenerys. I actually really liked her character. But the thing was, she's the obvious choice. And when you're telling a story of subversion, she could step into the role of an Aragorn and be the person who neatly walks up to and shatters the throne at the end. But that's not Game of Thrones. That's
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And then tied coupling with that, there were people who thought Jon should be either or the king. That Jon was prophesied, and he should have become the Aragorn character. I disagree with that even more so.
Well, see, Jon basically is Aragorn at that point if you made him king.
If you made him king, yes.
Because the whole time Aragorn denied his claim to the throne, and ever since Jon found out, and even prior to him finding out, he kept trying to deny the responsibility of leadership.
So set up to be Aragorn, yes.
Right.
He could not.
So that's fine. He wanted to keep falling into. He wanted to be a follower. Like every step of the way, he wanted to be a good soldier. He wanted to be a good fighter. He wanted to be a good. What's that?
Aragorn never wanted to be a good follower.
No, he was very much an individual.
Mm-hmm.
Jon always wanted to follow, and he kept getting pushed into a leadership role because
performing well.
Well, that's just it. He knows how to make decisions.
Some might get a murder, but hey, sometimes that's the job.
He wasn't afraid to make choices, and he wasn't afraid to consider choices that a lot of other people would never consider, like working with the wildlings. That was unheard of.
Yeah,
it was like, no, they're our enemy. We've been killing each other for forever.
Or bending the knee to Daenerys. I mean,
in the
North, that was
Sansa, of course, she was very much against that, and anybody in the North would have been against that. And he's like, look, I did it for the North. He's like, this was a choice that I made to save the North. So it's, of course, loyal. And again, as soon as he was given an opportunity to follow, he's like, oh, yeah, I want to follow. Like, I don't want to lead. I'd rather follow somebody leading.
Yeah. Now, the next one is Jon Snow should have killed the Night King. And my thought is, in the traditional Tolkien story, Jon Snow probably would have killed the Night King. It was really foreshadowed that he was the guy. He has the sword. It's all coming to that point. I think you could have pulled that off and kept the flavor of the story, but he would have had to been a sacrifice to enable it, not the actual person who landed the killing blow.
Yeah, Arya landing the killing blow, I thought was one of the best, if not the best things they did do in season 8.
The only problem I had was with her character. They dropped all of her middle story in season 8 because her job became to kill the Night King and to walk out of King's Landing. That was her job for the season. And so they dropped the entire assassin thing from all of the previous seasons, which I kind of didn't like. I felt at that point, that's also the foreshadowing that she won't kill the queen.
Yeah.
because she reverted back to younger, not more innocent, because she can't become more innocent, but she let, at that point she separated from the assassins and went back to her roots.
I think what's funny is some of the, this would have fixed it or this would have made it better suggestions about Arya specifically is like, dude, like all she would have had to do was like take any one of the faces that she had, sneak in, or hey, Jaime's here at up at the north, just kill Jaime. That gets rid of him.
That face would get him back to the queen.
Take his face, get back to the queen.
That would have been an interesting way to have her actually, if you want her to go through with the assassination, and you wanted Jaime and the queen to die in a connection.
Mm-hmm. But the fact that she had a bag full of faces in the north, and Sansa found it and was like, "What the hell?" And we never saw them again. She never used those skills again.
Mm-hmm.
All the skills we saw from that point forward were all fighting skills, which of course she had to learn those while training as a faceless man. But that's all like straight, person to person combat. That's not the sneaking, the stealth, Yeah,
I think story wise, her arc wasn't executed well, but I enjoyed it, and I thought at least the killing of the Night King was appropriate. Now,
I think it would have been better if she didn't. The jump was great, and they kind of needed to do the jump to set up the knife stop, drop, and then catch and stab.
Mm-hmm.
But my argument is, where did she jump from? How did she get there without all of the guys? Like, did she catapult herself? Like, how did she physically get to be able to jump?
To get her a shot. Yeah.
To get her a shot. Because they were completely surrounded. Yeah, because they were completely surrounded. So
it would have been cool if she would have taken the face off of one of the dead things and put it on her face.
I wonder what that would have done. That would have
been creepy. But
yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
I also, while we're talking about that sort of stuff, I was really hoping that we might have seen Benjen again.
Which one's Benjen?
Ned's brother, who in the books became a White Walker.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, he was one of the many characters who disappeared in season 8.
He saved Jon in like season 6, I think.
When they were going for the body, that was the guy? Yep.
Oh no, actually no. Was it Jon? I think he saved Bran.
I think he saved Jon too. Or was that Daenerys? I forget.
I can't remember when. He might have saved Bran while Bran was still with like Hodor.
He did both.
He did do both.
He definitely did the Bran thing. Yeah, that's where he was introduced, and he came back later, like once or twice. Now, moving on, a lot of people did not like Bran as the king, and I kind of have to agree with that one. I can't agree with that one. I think we talked about this a little bit. The idea was, mentally, he just was not stable enough. He couldn't be kept in reality. There was no way to hook him into the current time. He's a valuable resource. He knows a lot of stuff.
Absolutely.
He would be stashed in the king's castle, but not be king.
What I thought was funny was when I was reading this thing, it was talking about there, like Tyrion's whole spiel, like who has a better story than, Bran the Broken, and he and the thing that I was reading was from the perspective of Arya and Sansa, and they're like, literally everybody in this room has a more interesting story than Bran. Literally all of us. And each character proceeded to talk about their background and the shit that they've done. And every single person had like more to talk about, and more interesting, occurrences. And they're like, yeah, no. And I thought it was just really funny. The delivery was great.
So here, I think we have to say, who do we think would be a more suitable king? I have 3 choices. I'll do my last one last because that's my strongest argument. And if you have any, feel free to jump in. Gendry?
I think he's an interesting choice. He has no leadership.
That's why I don't think they'd give
experience.
It to him. Yep. He has no leadership experience. I don't see it doing to it, but he has a legitimate claim. Which, he remember
not as legitimate as Jon. He's the bastard of a he's the bastard of a usurper.
So if Jon is out, Daenerys is out. We're saying already.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying is of the remaining people.
Oh, I see. You're saying like of the people that were still standing in that conversation.
Yeah. But I agree. I don't think he'd ever be given it because of his lack of experience.
I think Sansa would have been the best choice of those present.
Okay, yeah. We're not talking about that one yet.
Okay.
That's my best argument.
Okay. All right, we'll get to that.
Now, my most interesting one, sort of my dark horse I would have loved to have seen, but I don't know how it would have made sense, would have been
Tyrion.
Ellaria Sand.
Ellaria Sand. Who is
she?
That?
Was the crazy woman who was murdering everyone in Dawn. And
is she still alive?
I don't know. Last we know, she was alive.
Are you talking?
Daughters get killed. She was in the dungeon.
The sand snakes. Are they all dead? Did all three of them die?
The girls definitely died, if I remember correctly, and she
don't remember that
to be murdered. But we never got resolution with her character. So I think her popping out.
Forgot about that.
You know, she definitely has leadership skills.
Oh, absolutely, and she's ruthless though. Like she'd be just as bad as Daenerys, honestly.
Yeah.
Well, only
she wouldn't have wanted to go to war as much.
Only if she had enemies. You know, at this point, all the enemies are dead, so she'd probably be fine.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to upset her though.
No. She'd be like, I think she'd be at this point. Prior to her kids and her husband dying, she would have been great. Mm-hmm. But now that she has lost all of that, she might be Cersei.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Now, I would have also, I agree, Sansa, I think, was the best choice for two reasons. The first one, to me, I don't know if it's the most obvious, but it's, once again, I made this point earlier, the Starks were representatives of the Tudors. They were the White Roses. They were the people who won the War of the Roses. There was so much inspired in this from the War of the Roses. The Tudors won. You know, that's how we got Henry VIII. That's how we got Elizabeth. That whole line came in when they beat the Lancastrian forces finally. So that for that stance, it would have made sense to throw back to where it was inspired from.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would be a great moral problem for her because she would have not let the North go.
Mm.
And so it would be her having, you know, with the moral dilemma of getting the North under control, knowing that they're going to be a problem and that whoever's going to be the warden is going to have to bend the knee.
Mm.
So,
but don't you think somebody who's going to be the warden would happily bend the knee to Sansa?
Well, no, I wouldn't let it because... well, whoever she names warden will be, but I would say there would be someone who'd step up to be, no, we're independent. And so you're back to that again, you know? And so I think she would reunify it, we'll say, but that would be a different series or something.
Well, what if she said, okay, I'll be queen, but Bran, you're going to be warden of the North since you're the last Stark
Once
male.
Again, he's not capable. I don't think she that would be the nice tie-up ending. I don't think so. I would like it to be her left with the moral dilemma of what about the North? Because she asked Daenerys that question, and now she has that.
And now she has to face it. Yeah,
and you could wrap it up, and it could be wrapped up relatively neatly, depending on how you want to go about it. But I would have found that a really interesting sort of moral thing to deal with in the post-resolution of the show. And the other thing is Jon Snow should at least given Ghost a hug. And I can't argue with that one either.
I also thought it was funny that he did like everybody was like, hey, how come he didn't pet Ghost? And he did pet him in the very last episode. And I had thought that Ghost was dead. I thought the only living direwolf that were Stark pups was Arya's. I thought he was gone already.
Oh no, because he sent Ghost to watch after her. So he got separated for a while. So Ghost was actually tailing Arya for a while.
During what season? I don't remember.
That was early, that was when he went up to the castle, I believe.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Yeah, because when there was Ghost made multiple appearances in this season, and every time I saw him, I was like, "Oh, look, there's a direwolf there," and I'm like, "Well, it's not Ghost because he's dead, and it's not Arya's, whose name I can't remember because they I said if it were either one of those." They would have addressed it. They would have acknowledged it in some way. John would have said, "Oh, Ghost, blah, blah, blah." They would have dropped a name. There would have been petting and loves or something. But since they never addressed it, I was like, "Oh, this is just some other direwolf that they have. Maybe it's one of the wildlings."
About that one.
And then it wasn't until the last episode I was like, "Oh, that is Ghost." I'm like, I thought Ghost was dead. So
and I thought the better resolution would be Ghost would ignore him and go down to King's Landing anyway, or he'd have at least a moment of love before he sent him up north and banished him. But whatever. So yeah, I can't really argue with those. Now there are some quick lessons for storytellers here. One, beware of breaking tropes, because as much as you hear and you read 10,000 blog posts about how all tropes are boring and tired, this show broke a lot of them near the end and people got ripped.
They're tropes for a reason.
The thing is, when people start to settle in on the pattern, and personally, I like it. So this is really faux advice for me. But beware that you can get backlash, especially if you don't execute it perfectly. People like their endings. As I like to say, people love Disney fantasy. There's a little problem. The parents get killed at the beginning, but at the end, it's all tied up in neat bows. And most of the criticism I saw was people wanting it tied up in neat bows, or at least the storyline that they were following the most.
Well, I don't even know if it's that. For me, what I see about it is just a problem that I've been complaining about movies for years now, but it's at this point, it's an epidemic in television and movies, is writers' lack of desire, it seems, to commit to a conclusion.
Yeah.
And as a viewer, you're especially with a movie and especially with a long series. So with a movie, it's an independent tale. So if you're going to give me all this weird stuff and you're going to give me twists and turns, fine, but wrap it up. And I'm not saying everything has to be a neat little bow. Obviously Tolkien is all neat little bow, and I get that. But you do need to give me something, because otherwise I get to the end of it and I'm like, you didn't tell a complete story. Or
the bigger irony is sometimes, they'll tie it up in a neat bow to end the series, and then they'll get brought on for 4 more seasons.
And that's a different conversation altogether. And we can have that conversation, but not now. I'm totally familiar with that. And that's why I'm pointing out a long series that knows at the end look, this next season, it's our last season, so we're going to tie things up. Okay, fine. So especially like this, and I said it earlier, and I'm going to say it again, where you have a bunch of twists and turns, and that's all fine and good, but I've had all the adrenaline, I've had all the anticipation. You've built me this way and taken me that way. I need resolution. And I feel like they did not give us. There were so many. I mean, I'm not saying anything that any Game of Thrones fan, any other Game of Thrones fan isn't saying, is that there were tons of resolutions that I wanted to see, either different or better, or just see because they didn't show it at all.
Yeah,
the Mountain and Hound is a perfect example. I don't think anybody wanted to watch it be a bullshit tie. I was okay with Clegane dying. I was fine with that. But I wanted to see him kill the Mountain. And the other thing that I've been complaining for years at this point is that we never got to see the Mountain appropriately utilized. Not once.
It's too late at this point.
Not a single once. I'm like, this guy is this towering mass of insane power, and you never got to see him execute.
He's like a step off of the Incredible Hulk, and you
exactly
mountain smash.
Put the Mountain out on the front line. Have Jon's men have the Unsullied catch up to Cersei, and have the Mountain be the thing that stands between them before she gets away into the tunnels.
I think an interesting way story-wise you could have dealt with that is that one scene where Cersei's admitting, and this could be to Jaime near the end, that she needed the mountain at her side because she's been frightened the whole time. And I think she's played her character that way.
I think that's totally true and reasonable, and that's fine.
Just as a service, you wanted to fight.
But what didn't make sense is that the mountain swore not to speak until all of her enemies were dead. He made a vow of silence when she was specifically when she shamed the other dude. Told him, he said, Sir Gregor has made a vow of silence until your enemies have been dispatched, something to that effect. Like he very lovingly picked her up and carried her away in her very hard moment. So there is a closeness between these characters that has been built, and certainly a savage loyalty from the Mountain to Cersei. So for him to totally blow her off, because of his brother? Like, he has never seemed like he had a lot of passion against his brother, except in like their very first interaction in
one scene. Yeah, and that's
aside to that,
the story was never built very well. Yeah.
Aside to that, he has only ever seemed like dismissive of his brother. So why would
he ever use the Mountain? They never really developed the Mountain at all. I kind of just thought he was a dead zombie for most of the.
Oh yeah, for like the past 3-4 seasons, he's been totally underutilized.
Yes, and now the other thing is Monday morning quarterbacks are going to appear no matter how good you do it, no matter what you do, when you tell a story. Just get ready. And if it becomes popular, people will question, and people will say you need to tie it up more neatly. If you tie it up neatly, then they'll say, "Oh, this should have been more messy."
Yeah.
No matter what choices you make, there will always be people who, because there are different ways stories can go, and they could still be good. So just realize that if it becomes popular, your story, you will have Monday morning quarterbacks. And the last one is, for all that is good and holy, use character development and not shock to course your narrative. When you create that course for your narrative and you need to make changes, use character development to do it. Don't just make it a shock where, all of a sudden, if in season 1, Arya just murdered Sansa, it would have made no sense. But you could do it and everyone would be shocked. Like, we're just subverting reality here, subverting the norms. Yeah, but I didn't even know she was a psychopath. Show me that first. Obviously, they didn't do that.
There is something to be said for that shock, but showing it after the fact. Then, I mean, not the shock, but the character development, afterwards, showing, look, here is all the reasoning. And I've seen that before, and I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with that too.
Because then you get both. You get the joy.
Don't need to be chronological.
Yes.
For me.
Yes.
Yeah. But you do need the explanation for the people who are watching it. It helps the story settle in their brain. So please.
I mean, that's just simply have your shit make sense. Like if it doesn't make sense, the viewer's going to be too jarred.
And as a bonus, just love what you're doing and do it. Once again, if you ever do something that gets anywhere close to as popular as Game of Thrones, you will have people. Me and Michael will do an episode about you too. And so saddle up.
You have a real world task here. What is this?
Okay, create a better story and execute it. A lot of people are doing Monday morning quarterbacking.
Well, that's the world builder task. I skipped ahead. I'm sorry. So world builder task is create a better story and share.
Yeah, and execute it though. Execute it in your storytelling. If you sell the rights to a movie or a different format and they don't quite get it right, that's nothing you could do about that. But create your story, share it, and execute it. It's that simple. Now for the real world task. Do you want me to do this one too, since it's...
Well, it says Michael called it. So what do you mean by that?
Okay, so this is going back to the announcement of the final book for Game of Thrones coming out.
Oh, yeah. And I pointed this out in the closed Facebook group, and the people that commented didn't seem to get that I wasn't referencing that he has said this before. I was referencing that I called this like 3-4 weeks ago.
Yeah, that it would come out like we'd hear about it coming out of the end of Game of Thrones. Now we don't know the dark, machinations that he went through, but I mean, obviously at that point, it's smart marketing.
It's perfect marketing.
And I'd have the book ready, and if everyone loved the end, I would just launch the book like right away.
Yeah.
And if people are upset, I'd give it a year so people want to know the correct ending. So.
Oh no! See, I think you have to launch it as soon as possible because eventually people are going to be like, I don't give a shit anymore. I'm watching X show and this show and that show. I think the readers that were going to buy the book anyway are going to buy the book anyway regardless. But if you want to capitalize on all the viewership and turn them into novel readers, then you got to grab them now because their attention spans are short.
Well, that's why you announce it. Yeah.
My wife has said I would read it. She's like, I would read it because I would like to know what should have been. It's
funny. I never started because he didn't finish it. When that last book comes out, I will go through them all.
But if I'm not mistaken, isn't there supposed to be 2 more books? This book and 1 more?
I think you're right. I think you're right. I think there are 2 more books. Good point.
So you can never read Game of Thrones because odds are he'll die before he writes that last one.
I don't know.
That's what everyone says anyway.
Okay, well.
I hope he does not. I hope he gets to write them all and then some.
Yes. May everyone live for 1,000 years, but a healthy, productive life, not like sickly and infirm. Okay, but yeah. So send Michael things.
No, that's a careful
Undercroft.
The Spartans would take insult to that.
I don't care.
Well, I'm just like referencing history since part of the show is about referencing history, and that's one of the things like in the 300 where he's like, may you live forever. And that's an insult because one of the main tenets is to die a beautiful death.
Well, that was actually most Greeks. I mean, even like your Athenian little democracy guy, what is the choice given to Achilles? Do you want to live a short, glorious life, or do you want to die old a farmer? I think something along those lines.
I didn't know he was given this choice.
Yeah. Well, that was a choice he was given when he was given his essentially invincibility, except for his heel. And then in the Odyssey, if I remember correctly, when they're in the underworld, Ulysses bumps into him and he's like, I wish I had gone for a farmer.
That's funny.
All right, so everyone have a good week and prepare your farms, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.